Hello, everyone. Calling here to give a demo to prepare us for our first discussion board, which is our first sketchbook assignment. So by now you should have watched the first 2 lecture videos and taken our quiz. Now you're going to go to this unit's folder, Line and Movement, and you're going to look for a folder that is called Line and Movement Discussion Board Assignments. And then you're going to open discussion board number 1. Please read over these directions very carefully. I'm going to go over them all in just a moment, but before you kind of do this yourself, I want you to go back after this video and read them word for word as you're completing the assignment. To complete this assignment, you're going to need your sketchbook. Today, I have just a large piece of white paper so I can demo it to you, but you can draw all of this in your sketchbook. You're going to need a pencil. A number 2 pencil is fine, or if you have your drawing pencils like this turquoise one here, you can use that. If you're going to use a drawing pencil, use something that's lighter, and we'll talk more about your different pencil numbers later in the semester. You're going to need your Sharpie marker that you purchased and your micron pens. Your ruler, your metal ruler, and you might find it helpful to have an eraser and sharpener for your pencil as well. Okay, so what we're going to be doing first for this, I'm going to kind of go step by step and then I'm going to show you some stuff. For part 1, within our sketchbook, you're going to be looking for some macro nature photography. There's a website link there so that you can look up the macro photography. Why are we using macro photography? Well, as I talked about in the last video, for our first assignment, our goal is to start with something that's representational in nature, and then to abstract it to the point where it almost becomes non-objective. So even though you can see in these different photos that I have here, that this could be, a fin, or this could be a close-up of an insect, I'm really zoomed in. And the idea of that is, while I start to draw this and I start to come up with ideas for my project, I'm going to abstract it to the point where it's completely non-objective, just like those student examples that we looked at. I cut a few of these out from a National Geographic magazine, or again, you can go to this website and look up some macro photography, but I would have at least 6 photos if you have them available to you to look off of for this first sketchbook assignment. You're going to, in your sketchbook with your ruler and a pencil, draw a grid of at least 9 squares. So no smaller than 3 inches by 3 inches. I'm going to make this video that's on the right side here bigger in a minute so you can see that closer up. And then you're going to start to draw some examples of what of just copies from your photo. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that you can see my video bigger. Okay. So in your sketchbook, your first initial squares that you're going to draw are going to be like the ones that I have here. Okay, so I'm going to redraw them with my Sharpie so you can see how I did it. These are called thumbnail sketches. They are meant to be very simple, which means that you don't have to spend a million hours on them, okay? They are sketches for a reason. They're quick. You could even limit yourself. If you're one of those people who takes a little bit too much time to do things, you might find it easy to give yourself like a 3 to 5 minute limit for each little thumbnail sketch. Why do we use thumbnail sketches? It helps us to generate ideas. You'll find in this class that a lot of our projects are very process-based, and that's in order to learn how to generate creative ideas, okay? So you may have heard of this idea of a rough draft when you were in high school, perhaps in an art class, but in this case, we're not even doing the rough draft yet. We're working our way up to it. We're in the idea generation portion of the assignment. And with that said, so in our first sketchbook, we're going to use, you can use pencil. I'm just using a Sharpie so you can see it better on my video. You're going to use your pencil, or you can use Sharpie, that's fine too, and your ruler to draw out 9 3 by 3 inch squares. So ultimately, you're really creating a grid. And again, this is just for rough sketches. So these lines, even though you're using a ruler, which is great, doesn't need to be pretty, okay? It's not an exact science. This is not your final draft, right? So it doesn't need to be perfect. So we're drawing these for our initial sketches. And in the directions for discussion board number 1, it's going to say that in your first 6 squares, you're going to practice simply almost like copying or deriving imagery from your pictures that you collected, okay? So you can see here that this picture of this bug I kind of played around with redrawing it here, but I'm not exactly copying, I'm just kind of taking some of the lines. So I'm gonna go back to those first videos where we talked about the elements of art and principles of design. And I'm gonna think, gosh, okay, we're gonna find a focal point in this. Oh, there's a focal point right here. Let me try drawing it. Or am I gonna find some implied line perhaps? Well, in this drawing here, excuse me, in this photo here, there's a really great implied line. This is like an insect leg or something. And I already, with a pencil, drew this out. Now, as for what do I use, Sharpie versus pencil? For these initial drawings, it's really whatever you're comfortable with. I say starting off with a pencil is good because you can erase, and then you can lead yourself up to getting comfortable to using your Sharpie. But for the first for the first 6 squares, it doesn't matter if it's pencil or Sharpie, whatever you're more comfortable playing around with. Okay, so you might in your first thing, I'm just going to copy really what I see. So I'm just doing a really rough sketch of what I see in my photo. Okay, and as I'm doing this rough sketch, I might begin to think about, okay, what can I abstract here? What can I zoom in on? And I'm thinking about different compositional strategies as I do this. So I'm going back to this idea of balance, positive and negative space. Am I thinking about how much space I'm taking up positively versus negatively? Am I being organic, right? So one of our goals is that we have organic shapes. So of course, once in a while, a circle might sneak in there or a square or something, but we mostly want to keep the lines that we're using in this assignment, the directional lines, to be organic, which means we can't necessarily define the shapes that we're drawing. Okay, I'm also going to think about things like principles of design, like variety. Am I using a variety of line thicknesses or thinnesses? Am I using a variety of different shapes that are organic? And also a few tips that I haven't talked about yet are when we're making a successful composition, we want to remember that how do we keep that viewer's eye engaged? So if we're jumping into the composition and we're jumping around and we're moving around, how are you engaging us? And one way to do that is to give us that resting point. So we want to think about a focal point, right? Another way is to let us have a break from going around the composition. So one of the benefits of using this macro photography is that we're zoomed in so close that a lot of our composition is cut off on the edges. That's a good thing for art. When we're working on art composition that's two-dimensional, being able to jump off the page for a while is a good thing for our viewer. It allows us to kind of enter somewhere. So here I could enter the page here, look around, move around, and then exit the page in another place. And that's just really helpful when we are thinking about getting that viewer engaged. Okay, so for your first 6 squares, you're going to just do this. You're going to go through your photos that you have. Your photos can be animals, or they can be some sort of, you could use close-up of things like microbes. You could use, I have some insect wings here. You can use landscapes that are from nature. It doesn't have to be actual living organisms. It can be things like tree bark or grass texture, whatever you want. And you can derive it from these pictures. Then when you get down to your final 3 squares within this 9, you're going to start to derive from the pictures that you've drawn. So you'll put aside your pictures and you're going to look up at these 6 squares and you're going to play around with redrawing them in certain ways. And as you redraw them, you might zoom in more. You might edit it. You might combine 2 together. There's really no wrong way to do this. So don't stress out too much. So, I might look here and say, oh, I really like this focal point, but I'm going to zoom in on it more. So I'm going to draw it here, but I'm going to draw it much bigger. And I'm going to play around with this pattern that I found in there that I thought was really engaging. And again, these are sketches. So this is not your final product. Look how fast I'm doing this. It does not need to be pretty, okay? I do want it to be thoughtful though. Doesn't have to be pretty, but I want you to think about what you're doing. Okay, so I'm playing around, I'm zooming, I'm just gonna go in and maybe I'll say, oh, I really like the texture over here. So I'm gonna add that. So we're almost like taking these different pieces of the puzzle and we're putting them together in these last 3 compositions. So you're gonna draw 3 separate ones down here that are deriving from the 6. So again, let me go through that. Your first 6 squares, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, are going to be copying lines and textures and shapes that are organic from the photos that you're looking at of the macro photography of lines in nature, okay? Nature can be living organisms, and it also can be something like the landscape. In your final 3 squares, you're going to take what you've drawn up here and sort of restructure it like those pieces of the puzzle, put them back together again, and just play, okay? This should not take you longer than 30 minutes, all right? This is not meant to be something we spend too much time on. The reason why we want to limit our time is because if we overthink it, we lose our creativity. Go with your first instincts and don't be afraid to mess up and screw up. And again, it can be in pencil or Sharpie. Just play around with both. I recommend playing around with both so you can start to get used to both tools. But ultimately, we will be using Sharpie and our Micron pens. So also, if you have your Micron pens, you can play around. And you'll see, with the Sharpie and the pens, there's going to be way much variety in our lines. Okay, so you're going to see that there's this thick line here, and then we have this like much thinner line from the pen. There's a reason why we have all of these different tools here with different thicknesses of line, because in our final product, we are going to want to play around with variety of line. We don't want to get too hung up on the same thing. It's really easy for us to get stuck into one line width, and we want variety. Okay, so our next step, this is part 1 of our sketchbook assignment, okay? Part 2 is going to be playing with Gestalt. So remember, our final assignment is a triptych, right? It's going to be 3 different cutout squares of paper that are going to use Gestalt. And within our triptych, we can go straight across. We can go down, right? So we can be horizontal or we can be vertical. But also remember, in some of the student examples I showed you, we can play around, right? We don't have to necessarily be linear. We can make it diagonal. We can make it a zigzag. However you want to orient your 3 compositions is up to you. So for part 2 of this sketchbook assignment, we are really just going to begin to practice how we can take these designs that we've played with over here and apply them to 3 compositions that use Gestalt. So again, I want to really emphasize here that there's no way of messing this up. As long as you're playing around with what you've got, you're practicing Gestalt, that's the whole goal. And if you're kind of feeling uneasy about it, go back to those past student examples, and they're going to give you some really good tips. Okay, so when you draw this grid for the second part of our sketchbook for part 2, you may draw it so that you are playing around with horizontal and vertical, if that's what you think your final squares might use. But you need 3 sets of 3 total, okay? So you're still going to be using 9 squares, but how they're oriented is up to you. So they might be like this, they might be in a row. So however you need to fit that in your sketchbook is fine. If that's going to take up 1 page of your sketchbook, great. If it's going to take up 5 pages of your sketchbook, that's fine. When you upload your photos of this assignment, it doesn't matter how many photos you have. Okay, so that next step then is going to say, okay, how can I combine these things to make Gestalt, right? So how can I bring in these compositions that I'm using? You might just mimic a few things. You might copy exactly what you started with. You might come up with new designs off the top of your head. You're beginning to be inspired by your macro photography, but then you can just roll with it, all right? You can use your imagination, but remember, everything that's in these squares needs to be what we refer to as non-objective or non-representational. So we need to get to a point where I no longer can see that that's an animal eye, okay? I no longer want to look at this immediately and say, oh, that's definitely an insect. I am making it non-objective. So we do not want to recognize these things as we get them drawn. So our final product needs to be non-representational. That means that I can't identify anything that's real in it, okay? And it can't even be abstract, because if I can say that's a bug, then I am not getting the point, right? It has to be lines, shapes. We're relying heavily on the elements of art and principles of design to create our compositions. So anyway, for this part 2 of our sketchbook assignment. So I'm drawing, here's my first panel. This is my first actual composition. And then I am going to practice my first set. I want them to be horizontal, let's say. So I'm going to play around with different thicknesses and thinnesses of line. And I made a little bit of a gap here in the way that I drew this my second time for my next 9 squares. And that's to be able to physically in my mind picture that this is going to be one piece of paper for my final, right? When I'm starting to think about ideas, this is going to be a second piece of paper or second composition. This will be a third. So it just helps me mentally think about that because I do need to create gestalt. They need to connect to each other, but I need to make sure I'm doing it with three separate panels. Okay, so I might play around with just some lines that I liked that I derived from my pictures. I'm going to do this really quick, so this is not going to be pretty, where I'm just thinking about gestalt. So I have cut off, this is my first square here, right? So now for my second square, I'm just doing this so you can see it better. You don't have to make your squares with Sharpie. I'm going to pick it up, right? I need to pick it up for gestalt, just like the past student examples. We need to be able to visually fill the hole from one panel to the next. So I might pick it up with a line that is exact. I might pick it up with an implied line. But they're connecting, right? I might have some sort of texture in here that begins to continue as well. Because, for this assignment, we're wanting to practice not only directional lines that have variety, right? Thicknesses and thinnesses and widths of lines, but we want to have a variety of textures. We are very purposely looking at these macro photography images to derive textures, to get ideas for what our textures could look like, right? So I might go back in and say, oh, I really like this texture. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to try to redraw this for my texture, right? And I might play around with that. So that's what these are for. These are for that exploration phase. We're having fun. I swear, it might sound like a lot of steps, but it's fun. It's meant to be experimental and playful. Okay, so I'm drawing my second panel, right? I'm finishing up my gestalt. I might bring in some I'm just really keeping it simple with my circles here, but you can draw anything here, anything. And then for my third panel, because I'm trying out my first three horizontally, I'm going to have to pick those lines up again, right? Because I want them to have gestalt. I want my triptych to be gestalt. So I might play around with some different types of line, but they're going to connect with that directional line. I'm taking it through the triptych, and you might even play around with another one that connects somewhere, right? So how you do this is really up to you. And then back at those past student examples, you can see three very different ways that the students did it. Okay, so for the remaining squares, I'm going to keep on playing around with one. So this is one set, right? One set of three squares that I've practiced. I need two more sets to complete this sketchbook assignment. So over here, I want to play around with maybe doing some gestalt that is using kind of a more fun zigzag pattern, right? Okay, so I might go back to my initial sketches to get some inspiration, and I might try to draw them in my own way. And as I'm drawing, I might change them up a little bit, right? I might play around with some different textures within them. I might do something new, something different. Again, I'm sketching here. This does not need to be pretty. We're going to talk about craftsmanship next time around for our final draft. So we're not going to get too worried about that. So in my first panel here, again, I'm just going over this in Sharpie so you can see it better on the video. In my first panel here, I am playing, I'm deriving. Okay, then I might pick up something kind of like maybe something I saw in my initial composition, and I might pick up. And I'm just going to continue that gestalt, okay? So I might play around with something kind of crazy that will bring the gestalt. I might do some implied line here, implied texture, and that is going to pick up that composition, right? And then my implied line, these fun little dots I'm playing around with here, I might not even need a physical line, an actual line, but gestalt can be created with texture, right? So as I finish my second panel here, I need to create gestalt in my third panel here. All right, and I'm doing that with a texture this time. And then I might, draw other kinds of fun things over here. So I need 3 sets of those, right? 3 sets of the 3 panels. And then I'm finished for this discussion board. So once you have that done, you're going to take photos. You take photo with your phone, okay? And when you take your photos, I want you to think about ensuring that your photos are using really great lighting. Okay, so when you're photographing your work, you want to photograph it by a window, or you can take it outside. And when you're photographing it, you're going to do it from bird's eye view, which means you're going to be holding over your composition you're going to be photographing it from the top up, right? So if you were looking over it, and that's so that I can actually see what I'm photographing. So for example, I'm going to show you if I can. See how I did that with bird's eye view? And then I'm going to take multiple photos so that I can get everything in. So I might take a photo of one page, the second page, the third. And then I'm going to be uploading those photos to our discussion board. So give me 1 second. I'm going to stop sharing my video so that I can share my screen. So when you upload, you're going to be in the discussion board, and there's a little helpful demo here for how to respond to a discussion board if you need to read it over, but I'm also going to just show you right now. So to respond, you're going to go into type a response. See how I just hovered that? So you see the directions here. You scroll down into the directions, and you're going to see responses. That's where you're going to add your thread. Okay, when you add your thread, your name is automatically going to come up, so I know it's you. Okay, so to upload your photos, there's a few different ways. Some people find it easy just to drag their photos. So depending on what kind of computer you use, you might have a photo on your desktop that you literally drag into it. Sometimes that works. I can even try here. Let's see. I wasn't prepared, so I don't have a photo ready, but let's see. Do I have a photo? And here I do. So you might find a folder on your computer and you might drag a photo into it. So if you have the right type of computer for this, this is the easiest way to do it. You don't have to name it if you don't want to, but just press save and it'll show up here. And then you can do multiple. You can drag multiple photos over and they're going to show up. Okay, so those are going to be what you then upload. But let's say that you don't have a nice computer, you might be on a tablet or something where you can do that dragging. Another way to upload a photo, get this video out of our way. Another way to upload the video, or excuse me, the photo, is to go to this little thing here, insert content, where the plus sign is, and it's going to give you the option for uploading an image. Okay. You also, I'm trying to think if there's any other ways. Yeah, you can attach. That's going to be the easiest way for most of you. So you save the photo. Most students will send the photos they took of on their phone to their email. So that way they can open up their email on their computer that they're using for class and save the photo files to their computer. Okay. So to do this again, you'll just go to attachment, just like you're attaching an email. So you look for this little button here and hover over it and you'll see attachment. And then you look for your photo that you saved to your computer. Okay. And it'll show up there. And you can name it, but you don't have to. Just press save. And your photo shows up. And then you can upload multiple photos using that approach. And once you have all your photos, and these are just like, this is just a figure photo, you're going to have actual photos of what you drew, right, from your sketchbook. Once that's done, you're going to follow the directions. It's going to ask you to upload your files. Okay. I'm going to make sure there's no. Yes. Okay, good. Sorry, I was just checking one thing. All right. So once you have those uploaded, you're going to click respond. And then your upload's going to show. And you're going to, everyone else is going to be able to see it too. So I'm going to make this bigger so you can see it a little bit easier. So they'll see my initial response. You're going to see your name here and you'll see the photos. Then the next student can go in. So each student can go in and type a response, and we're going to see them all kind of show up in order here on the screen. Eventually, when we start doing more discussion boards, we'll comment to each other's. But for this initial discussion board, we're not going to worry about that just yet. So once that's uploaded, your photos are uploaded, you are good to go. And you are ready to turn in discussion board number 1. Reach out if you have any questions or concerns. I'm always here to help you with the technical side of the computer, but also the technical side of the actual drawing and the art making portion. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.